The house was abandoned, silent, cheap, forgotten by everyone, or so I thought, beneath the floorboards below. Dust and broken memories. Someone was living there, a secretive alien foxwoman, hiding from a galaxy that would rather erase her than understand her. What began as a simple purchase turned into a discovery that challenged everything I believed about fear, survival, and responsibility. This is not a story about invasion or conquest. It's a story about how human curiosity, restraint, and empathy uncover truths the universe works hard to bury, and how one choice can turn a hiding place into a home when the galaxy expects humans to destroy what they don't understand. A human chooses to protect it instead. If you enjoy HFY sci-fi stories, hidden alien encounters, and powerful moments where humanity defies expectations, subscribe to the channel and stay with us. Your support helps bring more unforgettable stories to life. He was a quiet man who did not talk much about his past. People in the nearby town only knew him as someone who kept to himself and worked hard. For many years, he had lived in small rented rooms, moving from place to place whenever the rent went up or the owner decided to sell. He never complained, but inside he was tired. Tired of noise, tired of people, and tired of never having a place he could truly call his own. One day, while checking property listings at a small office near the bus station, his eyes stopped on a single page. It showed a large but broken house far away from town. The price was very low, so low that it felt like a mistake. He asked the agent why no one wanted it. The agent only shrugged and said the house had been abandoned for years. Too far, too old, and too much trouble, he said. That was exactly what made the man interested. He visited the house the next morning. The road leading to it was narrow and cracked, surrounded by tall trees and wild grass. The house stood alone, silent and forgotten. Its windows were dusty, and parts of the roof had fallen in. The paint on the walls had peeled away long ago. Still, the structure was strong, and the land around it was wide and open. As he stood there, breathing in the quiet air, something inside him felt calm for the first time in years. People from the town noticed his interest and tried to warn him. They said strange things happened there. Some talked about strange sounds at night. Others said animals avoided the place. A few even claimed previous owners left suddenly without explanation. He listened politely, but did not take their words seriously. He believed fear grows easily, where there is silence and emptiness. To him, it was just an old house that needed care. He bought the house using all his savings. There was no celebration, no excitement shared with others. He packed his few belongings, borrowed a small truck, and moved in the next day. The first night was quiet, almost too quiet. The wind moved through broken boards, creating soft sounds that echoed through the empty rooms. He slept on the floor with a blanket, feeling hopeful despite the cold. The next weeks were filled with hard work. He cleaned years of dust and dirt, repaired doors, and covered broken windows. Every day, he worked until his hands ached. He enjoyed the work because it kept his mind busy. But as time passed, small, strange things began to catch his attention. Tools he left in one place would sometimes be slightly moved. Footprints appeared in dusty corners where he had not walked. At night, he often heard faint noises beneath the floor. At first, he thought it was animals, maybe rats or old pipes shifting with the temperature. But the sounds were not random. Sometimes they came in patterns, like careful movement. Other times, he heard what sounded like soft crying, quickly stopping as if whoever made the sound did not want to be heard. He told himself he was imagining things. Living alone in a silent place can play tricks on the mind, he thought. Still, the feeling of being watched slowly grew stronger. He noticed cold air rising from the floor in certain rooms, even when all windows were closed. The house plans he received showed no basement, yet the air told a different story. One afternoon, while fixing a loose floorboard, he discovered scratches on the wood beneath. They were not deep, but they were clear, as if something had been dragged across it many times. His heart beat faster. He paused, listening. Everything was silent again. He replaced the board and decided not to think about it. Days later, he went into town to buy supplies. An old shopkeeper looked at him carefully and asked if he had moved into that house. When he said yes, the shopkeeper grew serious. He said the house had a long history of strange events and that no one ever stayed long. Before the man could ask more, the shopkeeper changed the subject, clearly uncomfortable. That night, the noises returned louder than before. He sat up in bed, listening closely. The sound came from directly beneath him. It was slow and careful, like someone trying not to be heard. Then came a short, weak sound, almost like a breath struggling to escape. His chest tightened. Fear told him to leave, but curiosity held him still. He spent the rest of the night awake. When morning came, he checked the floor again. This time, he noticed something new. One corner of the room had a thin line of dirt pushing through the cracks, as if something below had recently moved the earth. He wiped his forehead and took a deep breath. Instead of calling anyone or leaving, he made a choice that would change his life. He decided to find out the truth himself. He told himself that no matter what was hidden beneath the house, it was better to know than to live in fear. He gathered his tools and began to carefully remove sections of the floor. As he worked, a strange feeling filled him, not fear alone, but a sense that something important had been waiting for him here. He could not explain it. He only knew that this abandoned house was not as empty as everyone believed. Whatever secret it held had been hidden for a very long time. And as the floor slowly opened, revealing darkness below, he had no idea that buying this unwanted house was the first step into a story far bigger than his quiet life had ever been before. The man stared at the opening he had made in the floor. A dark space stretched below him, colder and quieter than the rest of the house. At first, he thought it was a small crawl space, maybe used for storage. But as he shined his flashlight down, he noticed the walls were smooth, almost polished, and there were faint marks on the ground that looked like careful paths. It was clear someone had spent time here, moving around. It was not recent. He climbed down carefully, his heart beating faster than he expected. The space was bigger than it had seemed from above. It smelled of earth, damp wood, and something unfamiliar, almost metallic. The floor below was uneven, and he could see stairs leading further down into deeper darkness. He paused for a moment, listening. The house above was quiet, the wind outside soft, and yet down here. He felt a tension in the air, as if the darkness itself was alive as he explored. He found objects that made him stop in his tracks. Small tools, carefully arranged, unlike anything he had seen before. Some looked like they were for building, others for writing or drawing strange symbols. There were even containers of food, preserved carefully. It was obvious that whoever had lived here had survived for a long time, quietly, without anyone noticing. He felt a mix of curiosity and unease. Someone had been hiding, living beneath his very feet, and he had no idea who or what it was. He went deeper, discovering narrow hallways, small rooms, and tiny shelters built from whatever materials were available. The walls had scratches, marks, and small carvings that seemed to tell a story he could not yet read. Occasionally, the softest sound reached his ears like a footstep, but so light it could have been a shadow. He froze each time, straining to hear, but the space was still. Whoever lived here was careful, always aware, always hiding. One corner held what appeared to be bedding. Soft mats, folded blankets, and a few pieces of clothing that did not look familiar. He picked one up and examined it. The fabric was smooth, almost silky, with patterns he had never seen. It was clearly not made locally, and it seemed to belong to someone very different from the humans around him. He felt a shiver run down his spine. The house was not abandoned. Someone or something was living beneath it. And this hidden resident had been doing so for years. In the following days, he explored more cautiously. He noticed signs of movement, small footprints in dust, scratches on walls, and even faint scents that he could not identify. Sometimes, when he paused and held his breath, he could hear the softest whimpers, almost like someone calling for help in silence. Each time, he reminded himself to stay calm. Panic would not help him understand. He needed to know who was here before making any decisions. He began leaving small offerings, water, food, even blankets, without revealing himself. At first, nothing happened. The items would disappear slowly, as if someone or something was testing him, learning if he was trustworthy. Gradually, he began to notice small changes. The blankets would be rearranged neatly, the food partially eaten, and sometimes he found tiny gifts left behind, small stones, feathers, or smooth pieces of wood arranged in careful patterns. It became clear that whoever lived here was intelligent, aware, and very cautious. One evening, he heard a noise unlike anything he had before. A soft sigh, filled with sadness and fear, came from the darkness below. He froze, unsure whether to respond or retreat. The sound was human-like but different, carrying a strange tone that he could not place. It tugged at his curiosity and at the part of him that felt alone in the world. He decided to speak softly, his voice shaking just slightly. "I won't hurt you," he said. The silence that followed was long and tense, but it was an important step. Someone or something was listening. He continued his careful exploration, taking notes of what he found. Maps of the tunnels, small hidden rooms, even places that looked like gardens grown in secret with artificial lights. Every discovery made him realize how much effort had gone into hiding this underground world. He felt admiration mixed with unease. The person or creature here had survived completely alone, using ingenuity and patience that amazed him. He wondered how long it had been since anyone else had seen this place. One night, he accidentally knocked over a small container. The sound echoed, and for the first time he heard movement in response. Soft, hurried steps retreated deeper into the tunnels. He felt a surge of fear, but also determination. The hidden resident was alive, watching, and clearly frightened. From that moment, he understood that any sudden move or noise could cause panic. Patience would be the only way forward. In the weeks that followed, he became familiar with the patterns of the tunnels. Certain areas were clearly used for sleeping, eating, or hiding. Others seemed like storage, carefully arranged for easy access. He noticed how meticulous the resident was, leaving no trace for outsiders to notice. He also realized that the tunnels were designed to avoid detection completely, with hidden exits, false walls, and cleverly built passages that made it nearly impossible for anyone to find the deeper rooms without guidance. He also began to notice subtle changes in the behavior of the resident. Small signs of trust appeared at objects left in places where he could find them, paths cleared in ways that suggested guidance, and hints that the resident wanted contact but feared it. He recognized a pattern of intelligence and caution, realizing that this being had survived by understanding humans well enough to stay hidden for years. Every sign of life he found reminded him of the careful balance between fear and curiosity. One day, while inspecting a storage area, he found evidence that the resident had been injured before. There were traces of what looked like healing wounds, carefully treated with materials he did not recognize. This discovery made him more determined to help, but also more cautious. The resident's fear of humans was clear, and he knew that any mistake could endanger both of them. He prepared small supplies in secret, learning to leave them in places where the resident could find them without ever seeing him. Slowly, over time, a silent understanding began to grow. He would leave food, water, and blankets. The resident would respond with small signs of acknowledgement, arranged items, cleared paths, and sometimes the softest whispers. Trust was building, but it was fragile. He knew that one wrong step could destroy the delicate connection that had formed. He reminded himself daily that patience, respect, and silence were the most important tools he had in this hidden world. Even as he explored, he never lost sight of the outside world. The house above remained quiet, seemingly abandoned to anyone who passed by. Friends and neighbors still warned him about strange noises and the history of the property. He nodded politely, but said nothing. He carried the secret of the tunnels with him, knowing that it was something no one else would understand. It was a responsibility, and he accepted it fully. Understanding that the life below the floor was fragile and precious, the more time he spent in the tunnels, the more he realized the resident was not human. There was something about the movements, the sounds, and the intelligence that felt different, almost alien. Yet, there was also something familiar in the fear, the need for trust, and the way the resident observed him cautiously. He felt a mixture of awe and empathy. This hidden being had survived alone, and now, for the first time in years, It had someone willing to listen, help, and protect. By the end of the second month, he had mapped much of the underground space. He knew where the tunnels led, where the residents slept, and where they kept supplies. He also knew that the resident was aware of his presence and cautiously beginning to accept it. Each night, he left small tokens, a bit of food, clean water, blankets, always respecting the resident's space. The trust was growing slowly. It's like a fragile flower pushing through the cracks of a cold stone wall. And so, the abandoned house above remained silent, hiding the secret life beneath. The man and the resident lived in parallel worlds for a while, the man above, the being below, but each was aware of the other. The house, long thought empty, had revealed its first hidden truth. Someone had survived here in careful silence. And now, slowly, the man was becoming part of that secret life, learning patience, empathy, and the meaning of trust in a world where neither could risk being discovered. He had grown used to the sounds and signs of life below the house, but he still had never seen the resident. Every night, as he left small offerings and checked the tunnels, he imagined what the being might look like. He knew it was not entirely human, but he could not picture the exact form. Sometimes he wondered if it might be a trick of the Minda spirit of the house, or something his imagination, created out of the strange sounds and shadows. But deep inside, he felt certain that life existed in those tunnels. Real and tangible. One evening, he decided he could no longer only leave offerings. He needed to know who he was helping, to understand the intelligence and courage that had survived here for so long. He took a deep breath and slowly descended the stairs into the dark. His flashlight flickered slightly as he scanned the tunnels, careful not to make sudden movements. He remembered every small rule he had learned: move slowly, speak softly, and never corner the resident. Above all, he had to show that he was not a threat. As he moved deeper, he noticed that the tunnels were even more complex than he had first realized. Hidden passageways, small chambers, and tiny shelters suggested a life of careful planning and constant vigilance. He could see traces of movement, footprints that seemed small and light. Marks on walls and objects shifted in ways that suggested intelligence and thought. And then he heard it. A soft, deliberate sound, almost like a sigh, coming from a shadowed corner. His heart pounded. He froze, unsure whether to call out or wait silently. The sound came again, a soft, trembling noise that was almost human, yet unlike anything he had ever heard. It was filled with fear, but also with something else, something like curiosity. Slowly he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not here to hurt you. I only want to help." He paused, holding his breath. The silence stretched long enough for doubt to creep in. Had he made a mistake by coming so close? A shape appeared, just barely visible in the dim light. He could see movement, slender, careful, deliberate, but it was partly hidden in shadows. He froze, unsure whether to take another step. The being shifted slightly, retreating, but not running. Its eyes, glowing faintly in the light, held intelligence and caution. For the first time, he saw the form clearly. It was humanoid, but not human. With features that reminded him of a fox-soft, elongated face, sharp ears, and fur that shimmered faintly under the flashlight. Its body was small and thin, and it moved with a cautious grace, as if every motion had been practiced over years of hiding. For a long moment, neither of them moved or spoke. Fear was present on both sides, but so was curiosity. The resident's eyes, wide and watchful, followed every movement he made. He lowered his flashlight slightly to show he meant no harm, his hands open and steady. Then, slowly, he put down the small basket of food he had brought. It was a simple gesture, but it carried a message. He wanted to help, not take. The resident approached cautiously, inch by inch. Every movement was careful, almost hesitant, but there was no aggression. She sniffed the air, her ears twitching as if analyzing his presence. He spoke again softly, explaining in broken words and gestures that he was alone, that he had no intention of harming her. The tension in the air was thick, but slowly it began to ease. The resident's body language changed, slightly less rigid, more relaxed, but still ready to flee if needed. He noticed the injuries. She carried small scratches, signs of malnourishment, and fur that had been torn in places. He understood that her life had been difficult, filled with constant struggle to survive alone in the tunnels. A deep sense of empathy grew inside him. He carefully reached out a hand, not to touch her yet, but to show that he meant no harm. She paused, then in a small, cautious motion, allowed him to move closer. Over the next several hours, he stayed in the tunnels, speaking softly and moving carefully. They did not share words as humans normally do, but gestures and glances became a form of communication. He learned that she had been left alone long ago, abandoned in a place where few could find her. She had survived by hiding, by learning to move silently, and by avoiding contact with humans. Her life had been one of fear and careful observation, yet she was alive, clever, and resilient. The man began leaving supplies in a more organized way. Considering her patterns and habits, he cleaned small areas of the tunnels, repaired weak spots in the floorboards above, and made subtle changes to make her life slightly easier. Slowly, over days and weeks, the resident began to approach more often. She would observe him, sometimes even take food directly from his hands, though always with caution. It was a delicate dance of trust, one that required patience, respect, and understanding. As trust grew, he noticed other signs of her intelligence. She arranged objects in careful patterns, left small tokens as messages, even helped him understand the layout of the tunnels. Her movements were deliberate, always calculated. Yet there was a sense of creativity and thoughtfulness in everything she did. He realized that living in hiding for so long had not dulled her mind. It had sharpened it. She was observant, resourceful, and careful in ways that far exceeded human norms. Despite the growing trust, fear was never far away. She would freeze at sudden noises, retreat if he moved too quickly. Always kept one eye on him, even when eating or moving around. He understood that her fear was not just instinct, it was a survival strategy. She had lived for years in a world where discovery could mean danger. He respected this, never pushing her beyond her limits, always waiting for her to make the first move toward contact. One day he found a small space she had prepared herself. It was neatly organized, with a small pile of food, soft bedding, and simple tools. She had clearly noticed his efforts and had begun to adapt her own space in response. He left her a small gifter, carefully cleaned and wrapped snack, placed just within her reach. When he returned later, he saw that it had been taken, and a small stone placed in its spot. It was her way of saying, "I notice you, and I accept this." As days turned into weeks, he learned to read her signals. A twitch of the ears, the flick of a tail, the placement of a hand or object tall became part of a language they shared. It was subtle, silent, but powerful. They were building a connection without words, an understanding born of patience, respect, and shared solitude. He realized that in this quiet, hidden world beneath the abandoned house, something extraordinary was taking place. Trust was forming between two beings from completely different worlds. The man began to feel a deep sense of responsibility. He could not simply walk away. She depended on his care and protection, just as he had begun to depend on her presence for understanding and companionship. The tunnels had become a shared space, a secret world where two lonely beings could connect. Each day he learned more about her habits, her fears, and the ways she had survived. Each day the bond grew, fragile but undeniable. He also began to notice her emotions. There was curiosity, hesitation, and even moments of playfulness. She would sometimes mimic his gestures, explore areas he had not yet seen, and watch him with an intensity that suggested not just fear, but recognition and appreciation. He understood that she was capable of emotions similar to his own loneliness: hope, fear, and the beginning of trust. By the end of this period, he realized that he had crossed a threshold. The tunnels were no longer just a place of mystery. They were a shared home, a hidden refuge where two very different beings had begun to understand one another. He knew that the path ahead would be full of challenges, that trust could be lost with one careless move, but he was determined. The abandoned house had revealed its deepest secret, and he had found a companion in the most unexpected of places. And for the first time in his life, he felt that his quiet existence had a new purpose: to protect, to understand, and to share the silence with a being who had survived alone for far too long. The world above remained unaware of the life beneath, but in the shadows, a bond was forming, one of patience, understanding, and quiet trust that would change both of their lives forever. The man had grown more confident in the tunnels, but he knew that trust was fragile. Every step he took, every word or gesture, had to be careful. He could sense the resident watching him constantly, learning whether he was patient, whether he would respect her space, whether he could be trusted. Over time, he realized that patience alone was not enough. He had to show understanding and empathy. He had to become a part of her quiet world without disturbing it, a delicate balance that required constant attention. He started spending more time in the tunnels. It's not just leaving food or supplies, but observing. He learned the patterns of her life, when she slept, when she moved around, and when she would venture out for exploration. He noticed how she used the space, arranging small objects in ways that seemed both functional and meaningful. Every small detail mattered. Each arrangement told a story, revealed a preference, or marked a safe path. He learned to read these signs, gradually understanding her thoughts and intentions without needing words. The resident began to take more risks. She approached him more closely, sometimes staying in the same room while he worked, watching him with quiet curiosity. He noticed that she was not just cautious, but intelligent, observing patterns, understanding the house above, and even noticing how he moved and reacted. She was learning about him just as much as he was learning about her. This mutual observation created a silent dialogue, one built on respect and patience rather than speech. He began small acts of help. He repaired weak sections of the tunnels, strengthened areas where the floor had started to sag, and made certain paths safer. At first, she watched cautiously, unsure if these changes were meant to trap her or help her. Slowly, she began to trust that his intentions were good. She allowed him to make adjustments, sometimes guiding him with small gestures, pointing with a finger, moving an object, or tapping lightly to indicate a problem area. Their collaboration grew naturally, each learning from the other. Out slowly and carefully, in the quiet of the tunnels, moments of subtle connection began to appear. The resident sometimes left small gifts, a polished stone, carefully folded piece of fabric, or a small plant she had grown in a hidden corner. These were signs of acknowledgement and trust, and he responded in kind. He began to leave not just food, but small comforts, like blankets, water in clean containers, and carefully prepared areas to rest. Each act strengthened the silent bond that was growing between them. He also began to understand the depth of her fear. She flinched at sudden noises, hesitated before moving into new areas, sometimes retreated entirely, hiding in corners of the tunnels. It was clear that she had survived by avoiding detection, that fear was ingrained in every part of her life. He respected this, never pushing her beyond her comfort, waiting for her to initiate contact. Over time, her hesitations became less frequent, replaced by a cautious curiosity and the beginnings of a fragile courage. They developed a routine. He would arrive with food and supplies, carefully leaving them in accessible areas. She would explore the changes, sometimes inspecting the tools he had brought, sometimes adjusting paths or objects. They communicated silently, through gestures, glances, and the careful placement of objects. It was a language built on trust, observation, and patience. It grew stronger each day. As the weeks passed, he noticed that she began to share more of her world with him. She showed him hidden corners of the tunnels, areas where she had stored supplies or grown small gardens with artificial light. He marveled at her ingenuity, the way she had survived for years without anyone knowing. It was a life built entirely on careful observation, resourcefulness, and adaptation. And now, for the first time, she allowed him to be a part of it. Despite the growing trust, fear never disappeared completely. She would occasionally retreat when unexpected sounds came from above, or when shadows moved in ways she did not anticipate. He learned to anticipate these reactions, to remain calm, and to reassure her with gestures, small offerings, or simply waiting silently. He began to understand that true trust was not about eliminating fear, but about respecting it and providing safety. Slowly, he began to see signs of emotion beyond fear and caution. She would sometimes mimic his movements, explore areas he had prepared for her, or pause near him with a curiosity that felt almost human. He realized that she was not just intelligent but capable of complex feelings, curiosity, appreciation, even a quiet affection that grew from shared understanding and careful care. These moments were small, subtle, and fleeting, but they marked a turning point in their relationship. He also noticed that she had developed routines of her own around him. She would observe how he worked, adjust her paths to avoid danger, and sometimes leave small signs of acknowledgement. It was clear she was learning to trust, testing the boundaries of safety, and discovering that he would not harm her. The tunnels, once a place of complete solitude and fear, were gradually becoming a shared space, a hidden world of quiet cooperation. One day, he discovered that she had left him a small arrangement of objects in a pattern he had not seen before. Stones, pieces of wood, and small plants were carefully placed to form a simple path. It was a message, a signal of acknowledgement, perhaps even gratitude. He understood immediately. He carefully followed the path, leaving a small gift at its end: a clean blanket, simple meal, and a note made of folded paper explaining that he was there to help. When he returned the next day, the gifts had been taken, and the path slightly altered, indicating that she had accepted the gesture as time went on. He realized that this bond, built on patience, understanding, and silent communication, was more meaningful than anything he had known before. He had found a companion in the most unexpected of places, a being who had survived alone for years and now allowed him to share part of her hidden world. Each day the trust grew, the bond strengthened, and the tunnels became not just a place of survival, but a home shared by two beings. Learning to coexist, he also understood the responsibility that came with this trust. One careless step, one sudden noise, could undo months of careful connection. He remained vigilant, always aware of her reactions, adjusting his behavior to ensure she felt safe. The tunnels had become a delicate ecosystem of trust, patience, and understanding, and he accepted this role fully. He knew that her life depended on him as much as his growing understanding of her depended on her as the weeks turned into months. Their connection deepened. She would sometimes sit near him while he worked, watch him with keen interest, or allow him to clean or repair sections of the tunnels. She was still cautious, still fearful of sudden movements, but she had begun to recognize that he was no longer a threat. Trust had been built slowly, carefully, and it was now strong enough to allow small moments of companionship to emerge. He began to feel a sense of wonder at the life he had discovered. The resident, a being so different from him, had survived in complete isolation with intelligence, creativity, and resilience. And now she was willing to share a part of that life with him. The tunnels, once a place of mystery and fear, were now a space of connection, cooperation, and shared understanding. Every small gesture, every careful movement, reinforced the bond that had formed between them, and though the world above remained unaware, the abandoned house had revealed its deepest secret. Beneath the old broken floors, a hidden world thrived, a world where trust, patience, and empathy had created something extraordinary. The man had become part of that world, not as an intruder, but as a companion, a helper, and a witness to the resilience and intelligence of a being who had survived alone for far too long. He knew that challenges would come, that fear and caution would never disappear entirely. But he also knew that their bond had reached a point where understanding and care could overcome most obstacles. The tunnels were no longer just a hiding place. They were a home, a shared refuge, and a space where two beings from completely different worlds had discovered the possibility of trust, companionship, and quiet understanding. The quiet life in the tunnels had become a delicate rhythm of trust, care, and careful observation. The man had grown accustomed to the sounds, movements, and signals of the hidden resident, and she in turn had begun to accept his presence. Yet he knew that their safety was fragile. Even the smallest mistake could bring danger. Each night, as he left food or repaired a weak section of the floor, He reminded himself that above the house, the world remained unaware of the life below. And that secrecy was their most important protection. One morning, he noticed something different. Vehicles he had never seen before were parked at the edge of the property, their engines low but running. There were people moving carefully along the dirt paths, observing the house, taking notes, and occasionally speaking into radios. His stomach tightened. Authorities, perhaps curious about the abandoned property, were nearby. He understood immediately that this was a moment of danger. Any exposure could put both of them at risk. He went quietly to the tunnels, speaking softly as he moved. The resident was already aware. He could feel the tension in the air, the subtle changes in movement. The way she hid more carefully, her ears twitching and tail lowering in instinctive caution. He knelt beside her hiding spot and whispered, though she did not understand his words, "It's okay. We have to move carefully. Stay with me." She hesitated, then slowly nodded, a sign that she trusted him to guide her through the danger. For the next hours, he moved with careful precision. Every sound, every movement had to be calculated. He led her through hidden paths he had discovered over months of exploration, avoiding weak spots and areas that could expose them to the authorities above. The tunnels, once a space of quiet trust, now became a maze of survival. He noticed her reactions, the small signs of anxiety, and adjusted his pace to match hers. Patience and calm were their most powerful tools at one point. They reached a small chamber that he had prepared as a temporary refuge. It was hidden behind a false wall, one that blended perfectly with the tunnel's surroundings. He helped her inside and whispered reassurances. She pressed close, the tension in her body slowly easing, and he realized just how much their bond had grown. In that moment, they were not just two beings sharing space. They were allies, partners in survival, and a team facing the unknown together. He had to make a decision. Staying in the house above, even for a short time, was too dangerous. The authorities' presence meant that exposure could occur at any moment. He thought about all the months they had spent building trust, learning each other's habits, and creating a hidden world of safety. Losing that now, by remaining in place, would destroy everything they had worked for. He decided then that they had to live not just for a night or two, but for good. Preparing for departure was delicate work. He packed small supplies carefully: blankets, food, water, and tools. Every item had to be light enough to carry through the tunnels, yet sufficient for survival elsewhere. He avoided making noise, using months of knowledge about the residents' movements to guide the process. She watched closely, understanding that something serious was happening. The trust between them allowed her to cooperate without hesitation, moving silently beside him, following his lead through every twist and turn of the hidden paths as they moved deeper into the tunnels. He realized the extent of what they were leaving behind. The abandoned house, once a place of quiet refuge, now held memories of the time they had spent together, the discoveries, and the small acts of care that had built their bond. He paused for a moment, acknowledging silently the world they were leaving, then pushed forward with determination. The outside world could not know of her existence, and he would protect that secret at all costs. They emerged from a hidden exit he had discovered months earlier. Far from the main house, and well out of view of the authorities, the sunlight was harsh after months underground, but it was a sign of freedom. He guided her through dense trees, using his knowledge of the land to avoid roads, houses, and paths where they might be spotted. She moved cautiously, but with him guiding the way, she began to relax. He felt a mixture of relief and pride that they had reached this stage safely, and pride in the resilience and courage she had shown. They eventually found a small, secluded area in the woods, a place he had scouted previously as a safe hiding spot. It was near a stream, surrounded by trees with enough space for them to set up a temporary shelter. He carefully helped her explore the area, finding soft ground for sleeping, water to drink, natural resources they could use to make the space more comfortable. She seemed to understand immediately that this was a new home, a place where she could feel safe again. Over the following days, they adjusted to their new environment. He built small shelters, organized supplies, and created simple routines for both of them. She explored cautiously at first, then more boldly, testing the boundaries of the space and learning that this new area could provide safety and freedom without constant fear of exposure. Their trust and teamwork grew stronger as they adapted, each learning from the other and finding new ways to communicate and cooperate. Even in this new place, he remained vigilant. Danger was always a possibility, and he knew that outsiders could stumble upon them at any time. But he also felt hope. The bond they had built in the tunnels was now a foundation for life outside the old house. They were no longer confined to the shadows beneath abandoned floors. They could move, explore, and survive together. With the safety and trust they had painstakingly developed, he watched her carefully, noting how her movements became more confident, how her curiosity returned, and how she began to engage with the world around them in small ways. She had survived alone for years, but now with him she had companionship, guidance, and protection. And he, who had once sought only a quiet place of his own, had discovered something far more meaningful, a connection that transcended fear, differences, and isolation. As time passed, their lives settled into a rhythm. He continued to provide food, water, and care, while she adapted to her new surroundings, exploring safely and learning to trust humans, at least in the form of him. The abandoned house above remained empty to the outside world, its secret intact, but for them, the story had moved forward. They had escaped danger, built trust, and discovered a life together that neither could have imagined before. He reflected on the journey they had taken, the months of cautious interaction in the tunnels, the slow development of trust, the delicate balance of patience and care, and finally, the escape from imminent danger. Each step had required thought, empathy, and courage, but it had all been worth it. The resident, once a being living in fear and isolation, now had a companion and a chance at a life without constant threats. And he, once alone and searching for a place to call home, had found purpose, connection, and the extraordinary experience of protecting and caring for a life so different from his own. In the end, the man understood that some of the most important stories are never told to the world. Above the old abandoned house, life seemed quiet and ordinary. But beneath the floors and deep within hidden tunnels, a secret had existed for years. Now, that secret had a future. They had survived together against fear, uncertainty, and the risk of discovery. And in their shared silence, trust, and companionship, they had found something rare and precious, a life rebuilt from isolation into connection, safety, and hope. As they settled into their new refuge, he knew that challenges would come again. The world could not be ignored forever, and they would have to remain vigilant. But for now, the danger had passed, and they had each other. The tunnels, the house above, and the months of careful patience had all led to this moment. Safety, understanding, and a bond that neither fear nor isolation could destroy. They had begun a new chapter, one of quiet survival, trust, and the shared experience of living together in a world that did not yet know they existed. And in that quiet, secluded place beneath the trees and near the flowing stream, they found peace. Not the peace of the ordinary, but the peace earned through patience, care, and understanding. A hidden life, once threatened, had been saved, and two beings from completely different worlds had discovered that connection, trust, and compassion could overcome fear, secrecy, and isolation. They were no longer alone, and the world above would never know the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this moment.